Hello, welcome to Still School Online. My name is Morwenna Kearsley and I am an artist working mainly with photography, and I'm also a tutor at Stills. If you'd like to see some examples of my artwork, you can go back to a previous video. It's the one on colour, shape and texture, and at the beginning of that video you can see some examples of my artwork if you're interested. So today we are going to look at ways of making images without a camera. First of all, we'll look at putting text and image together, and the text and image will come from different sources. Then we'll look at appropriating images. So in other words, borrowing images from other sources and giving them a new meaning. Finally, we'll experiment with cutting and sewing into photographs. As usual, it's up to you how you use this video resource. There are 3 sections with 3 tasks, so you might want to watch it all the way through once and then go back and do the tasks in each section, or you might want to stop it when you get to each task, complete the task and then go forwards. It's completely up to you. Photographic images are all around us all the time, everywhere we look. Newspapers, adverts, on the side of buses, on albums, in books, in films, in TV, on the back of receipts, on our food, everywhere. This is one of the reasons I find photography so interesting, and sometimes instead of using my camera to make new photographs, I like to make new images using found materials, and that's what this video workshop is all about. First, let's look at the work of Barbara Kruger. An American, she was born in 1945 and is often described as a conceptual artist, which in general terms, I suppose, describes an artist whose medium is an idea or a concept, usually manipulated by the tools of language and sometimes documented by photography. These collages here were made in the 1990s and refer, I think, quite clearly and boldly to consumerism and gendered advertising, amongst other things. And for the graphic design geeks out there, the series is recognisable for her use of the Futura bold oblique font and the Helvetica ultra condensed font as well. And she combines that with these really bold red borders. The phrases in her work often include pronouns such as you, your, I, we and they, addressing the viewer or consumer directly. The photographs often come from other sources such as advertising, and the text also mimics that language of advertising. And they're very direct, aren't they? Although the imagery itself might seem a little bit dated to us now, advertising has remained pretty much the same, I would propose, from the 90s to now. It's still that really direct and almost kind of aggressive communication with us, the consumer. And I think that Kruger's work still stands up now. I don't think it doesn't feel dated to me, and it still feels relevant, perhaps even more relevant now than ever. So next, I feel a wee bit cheeky doing this, but next we're going to look at some of my work. So this is work that I made quite a few years ago. And the reason I'm showing you it is because it's all made from appropriated, so borrowed photographs. So the images are all taken, gleaned is another word. They're all gleaned from internet Google search pages. So all I did was I typed in sinkholes, and these were some of the images that came up. Now the reason I was interested in sinkholes was because I started to think about them in a similar way as the aperture on our camera. So the aperture on the front of your lens is kind of like your eye, the iris of your eye. It expands and contracts to let in more or less light. So the images that you're looking at, I actually, just because of the way I like to work, I photographed the images from the screen onto colour film, and then I printed those colour negatives in the darkroom. So which is why they look a little bit desaturated, and they maybe perhaps look a little bit older than you would expect from a Google image search. That's just because of the film I was using. And then what I did is I went and looked at camera adverts from the 1970s in particular, although right up until the 2000s. And what I did was I cropped the text out of the adverts and I put it together with the sinkhole images. And the reason I did that was to try and strengthen that connection that I was making in my head between this environmental phenomenon that had generated these aperture-like voids in the Earth's surface, which in turn I saw replicated in the circular shape of the lens's aperture. So perhaps a metaphor for thinking about what is made visible and who or what has the agency to do so. Okay, so here is your first task, and it is to make a new image by using the text from an advert and a photograph from another source. So you might need a pair of scissors, you might want glue, but you don't need it. You will need some source materials, so I got this Vogue cheap for £2. It's quite good because it's got just full adverts really. Or you could use just a cheap newspaper, something like that. Right, so what I'm going to do first of all is go through and I'm going to cut out pieces of text that I might be able to use for my work. And I'm looking for interesting words, but I'm also looking at font, the way the letters are spaced, all of those things. Okay, so here are my choices that I've got. I quite like the eyewear one. I think I might use that. So here is my image and it comes from a different source. So this is a Gucci advert, I think. And what I'm going to do is went back through the magazine to look for pictures of legs. I have an idea here. So I'm just going to cut out as many different interesting looking shoes and legs as I can. Nice gold shoe there, another wee one. And okay, I think what I'll do is I'll take the background and JLo's face out. So there we go. So now we're just looking at yellow, blue and red colours. And what I'm going to do is take these legs and, you know, I'm not even going to use glue. I'm just going to place things with my hand. I can't be bothered with glue. So I'm going to use the text that says eyewear, but obviously instead of glasses, which is what the text normally would advertise, I'm going to use these legs as a kind of surrealist type of eyewear. And when I'm ready, I'm going to photograph it. So don't need to use glue because I've got a photography. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick picture of it. Remember, you can tap on the image to make it sharp and in focus. And then I'm going to go into the edit function so that I can crop it. And I think what I'll do is just bring up the bottom line to where the yellow block starts. And I will just make it into square format as well. Saving, saving. And then what I'll do, have a quick look at it. Yeah, I like that. So next I'm going to do my final editing in Instagram. So I'll load up Instagram. There we go. So I'll just adjust the size using those little arrow keys. And then I'll hit next. And instead of using one of these presets, one of these filters, I'm just going to click on the edit button and I'm going to adjust my brightness. So I'm going to bring the brightness up to make that blue look even lighter and bluer. I'll adjust the contrast. Just bring that up a bit. And definitely I'm going to adjust the saturation because I want this to be really colourful. So you'll see if you take it down, it will go into black and white completely, and then you bring it up and you make the colours more saturated and punchier as you go up. So I'll take it to about there, I think. It's enough. And then I'll just check my highlights. I might bring them up a bit again to make the blue even lighter. Play around with my shadows, but again, I think they're okay as they are. And the last thing I want to do is you have the option of this vignette, which is basically making the edges look darker. And I'm not sure, yeah, I'll just put on a light vignette for this image here. And then you also have this tilt shift option, which mirrors the functions of an old format view camera. And it basically means only a small part of the image is in focus, the rest goes out of focus. But I don't think I want it for this image. I want it to be nice and clear and sharp. Okay, so that is me done. And this is my final image here. So I quite like this, it's all right. I took the text from a glasses advert and the image from a bag advert, and I hope you agree that I've managed to transform the meaning of the original text and create something in a relatively short space of time that I like. Okay, I can't wait to see what you make. Good luck. Cheerio. Appropriation art involves using pre-existing images or objects and transforming their meaning by changing the context in which they are viewed. When I think about appropriation art and photography, the first artist I think about is Sherry Levine and her famous series of artworks called After Walker Evans. She was part of a group of American artists who came to prominence in the late 1970s and early 1980s called the Pictures Generation. And they focused on disassembling images found in the mass media and also questioning their place in the world as artists. So for this work, Levine took this ultra famous photograph by a really important photographer called Walker Evans. She rephotographed it and then she exhibited it with her name in place of Walker Evans's name. Everything about the image had stayed exactly the same, except for the fact that she had rephotographed and reprinted it. Have a think about why she did that and what kind of questions you think that might have raised. Appropriation art brings up lots of questions about copyright. Who retains the rights to the image and why? There's a very famous case of a copyright ownership concerning these two, a monkey and a photographer called David Slater. The short version of the story is that the photographer was on a mission to photograph these monkeys and had been following them for several days. He set up a situation in which he left his cameras alone, and eventually one of the monkeys picked up the camera and took a selfie. Eventually, these photographs picked up traction on the web and were published without permission on a number of sites. Claiming loss of earnings, Slater tried to sue. PETA, the animal rights organisation, on behalf of the monkey, countersued, stating that the monkey had the rights to the photograph. It's a really interesting case to read up on, but the outcome is that in 2018, Slater won the case. The judge's decree is that only humans can file lawsuits, not animals. Okay, we're going to look at two more examples of appropriation art before we do the task. This is an artwork called Holy Bible by Broomberg and Channerin, published in 2013. What we're looking at is a convincing replica of the King James Version of the Bible. As you can see, into the pages of this book, the artists have placed images, taken in turn from the Archive of Modern Conflict. The Archive of Modern Conflict was established in the early 1990s and contains photographs as well as some manuscripts and objects that relate to the history of war, covering the 19th and 20th centuries. Stills actually exhibited part of the Archive of Modern Conflict in early 2018. I wonder if any of you saw it. It was a really brilliant show, full of photographs. The walls were absolutely stacked with them. Really interesting. So why did Bloomberg and Channerin choose to conflate these two sources, a photographic archive of war and a replica Bible? Well, there's lots of different analyses of this artwork, but for sure the artists are questioning the very idea of authorship. Who has the power to make meaning and why? For some people, the Bible has an absolute truth in a similar way to the seeming objectivity of photography, in particular documentary photography. And the artists, in this instance, play this power dynamic contained in both sources off each other. It's perhaps also a comment on the cliches inherent in the documentation of human warfare through the ages. A powerful work in my opinion. I wonder what you think. When Stills reopens its doors again one day, you can come and look through a copy of this book in Stills's library, and I'd highly recommend that if you can look at this book in the physical world, so actually flipping through the book, it starts to make a lot more sense. It's quite difficult to get a sense of it through just looking at online pictures. And in fact, for all the artists that I've mentioned in these workshops, Stills has books on most of them. So when it's safe to do so, highly recommend a visit to the library. Next, let's have a look at Anne Collier, who is an American visual artist working mainly with appropriated photography. We're just going to concentrate on this series, which is called Women Crying, and it was made in 2016. We can see quite clearly that these are photographs of women crying, and I think it's also quite clear that they come from lots of different sources. And indeed they do. Collier collected them from various album covers from the 1950s to the 1980s, using her camera to crop out the image of the face and create a new photographic document. While the original imagery shows perhaps quite a romanticised staging of femininity, through the act of appropriation, Collier creates the conditions for us to look critically at the original source material and ask questions about how, in this case, women are represented in album cover art of the past. So the act of making the photograph may seem simple enough, but the questions the new artwork generates are complex and multiple. Okay, here is the task. So what I'd like you to do is to look at advertising imagery in magazines or on billboards or wherever you like. Look for images within images. What do you see? Hands, burgers, flowers, smiles? Make a series of photographs to show us what you see. So what I'm going to do is go through this Vogue magazine, might as well get my money's worth out of it, and I'm going to use my phone and I'm just going to flick through, and I think what I'm going to do is probably to concentrate on hands, seeing as they're everywhere in this magazine. So I'm going to take my camera, and it doesn't involve any cutting or anything like that. I'm just going to zoom in on all the different hands I can see, and remember you can press on your screen to get it to focus, but you can also photograph out of focus as well. There's nothing to say it has to be in focus, and you can change how the image looks by just tilting your camera back and forth, bringing it closer or farther away from the subject. Okay, so just really the emphasis is on looking and playing with the camera. Okay, and I'm just going to go through the magazine, looking closely at the hand shapes and photographing them. So what I did was to take all the photographs off my phone, I put them onto my computer and I just put them into a little grid. And the reason I did that is so that I can start to compare them, start to look at the similarities and differences between all these different hand pictures from the same magazine. So, it's up to you what you want to do with this. The emphasis of the task is on appropriating images. So feel free to take your source imagery from anywhere, take inspiration from any of the artists we've looked at, and good luck. Okay, this last section is on cutting and sewing images, photographs in particular. So we're going to look at one artist for each. The first one is Maurizio Anzeri, who is an Italian artist who lives and works in London. And you can see his work is all about taking found vintage photographs and sewing directly into them. Now, he obviously has tremendous skills with a needle and thread, because I have tried to make work similar to this and not managed it at all. This is very intricate, but let's look at what we aspire to. So by adding sewing to the original image, he distorts and changes the meaning of the source material. So for me, when I look at them, I get the feeling that he's adding some kind of a aura to the person in the photograph that maybe wasn't initially there. So he takes like quite an ordinary looking portrait and he infuses it with this mystery. And I think the colour choice of the threads plays an important part into how we read the emotions present in these images. So if you have got some good embroidery skills, definitely give this a go. And if not, I'm going to show you a more simple example in just a minute. So the slightly more simple example, but no less effective, is by a friend of mine, David Grinley, and he made this image a few years ago. Which I really love, because he has taken this image of a statue, I think it's probably in a graveyard, and what he's done is he has taken quite a thick red thread and just quite simply sewn into the photograph to create a cross. And what I particularly like about it is he has taken the original sewn photograph, re-photographed it, and presented it as a flat object. So we can't see any of the threads on the back. And there's something I like about that flattening that we can do with photography. Also, the great Andy Warhol used sewing in his work, and this is a lovely series where he takes multiple photographs and he sews them together at the edges with a sewing machine. And what I particularly like is he leaves these little threads hanging out. So it's a way of combining multiple images together. Or if you don't fancy sewing, you might want to try cutting. This is John Stazaker's work, and he is an English artist and he lives and works in London. And he uses found photographic material, so images found in books, magazines, postcards, and he uses them as ready-mades. So in this example here, you can see it looks like an old movie postcard, and he's just really simply but really effectively cut this triangle in to the original postcard, so it looks like the guy in the image has got this kind of spot beam gaze, and for me it transforms it into something closer to a science fiction poster or something like that. Or you might want to take two completely different images, so in this case it's an image of a female and an image of a male, cut them in half and shove them together, and it's got it reminds me of early surrealist and Dada collages. Here he has taken two complete images, so here he's not even actually done any cutting. He's just taken, again, it looks like a photograph of a movie star and a postcard, and put one on top of the other. And it really lets us imagine these two disparate photographs in a new way. And here's a couple that I have made over lockdown. These were just images I was taking of flowers because it was nice, making me feel nice to look at flowers. Just shot on my phone, and then I got them printed out at an online photo printing business. They just post them straight to you, and then they are cut out and put onto a still life background. So these two photographs come from completely different shoots, different times, but I really enjoyed putting them together and being able to read a new set of meanings into them. So I hope you have fun. Please remember that the emphasis of all these tasks is on playing with your materials, having fun, and not being too precious about the outcomes. All right, enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed that video and that you enjoyed doing the tasks as well. As ever, we would love to see the photographs that you produce, so please feel free to post them at Stills School Instagram page or email them through and we can post them for you. All right, take care. See you soon. Bye.